My name is Nadia. I was born and raised in a small village that's never been on any map. Here, time moves slowly as the river flowing through the green rice paddies. The wind carries the scent of mud mixed with wet grass, and the afternoon sun always returns with a warm orange face. Among all the things I love about this village, there's one thing I'm most reluctant to leave. Him. His name is Bayu, my childhood friend, my next-door neighbor, and the only person who knows my little secret, that I'm afraid of being alone at night. Funnily enough, he also knows an even more embarrassing secret, that for the past few months, my heart has been pounding strangely whenever he stares at me for too long. Today was like any other day. We sat on the edge of the rice paddy, our legs dangling over the embankment, watching the farmers return home one by one. "Aren't you tired of looking at the rice paddies all the time?" he asked, throwing small pebbles into the irrigation water. "I'll get bored when I can't see you anymore," I replied. Casually, but secretly, my heart was racing with panic. He laughed, but his eyes lingered on me, as if searching for the meaning behind my words. I pretended to look down, tugging at the tips of the grass in my hands. As dusk approached, we set off. Bayu led me along the red dirt path, flanked by coconut trees. His pace was leisurely, but he occasionally glanced back to make sure I wasn't left behind. "Aren't you sure you don't want to come with me to town?" he asked suddenly. I shook my head. "I don't want to leave this village. Leave you." He didn't answer, just smiled faintly, as if harboring something he couldn't say. As the sun set behind the hill, I briefly thought, if life were like this forever, I would be happy. But I don't know. Soon, this peace will be snatched away by force, and when that happens, he and I might no longer be sitting on the rice paddy embankment. We would be standing between fire and tears.
At the time, I didn't know what it meant. To me, it was just another beautiful afternoon. The sun was golden, the wind carried the scent of wet earth, and the distant sounds of forest birds could be heard. Bayu led me on a detour through the small forest behind the village. He said wildflowers were in bloom this season. Our footsteps made the crunching sound of dry leaves being trampled. Occasionally, sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating golden flecks on his face. I watched silently. He seemed like a part of nature itself, serene yet unpredictable. "I got it," he exclaimed, showing me a pale purple flower he had picked from a bush. "Do you know what this is called?" I asked. He shook his head. "All I know is if you hold this, you look beautiful." I laughed, but inside, his words hung like a thread that never quite cut. We gathered as many flowers as we could carry. Bayu made a crown from the stems and placed it on my head. "So you look like a forest princess," he said, staring at me for a long moment. I pretended to look away, but my cheeks felt hot. On the way home, we sat on a fallen tree trunk. The sun was starting to fade, leaving an orange glow that enveloped the entire forest. There, we talked endlessly about childhood, about dreams, even about completely unimportant things. But amidst the laughter, I felt something strange, an invisible distance. Bayu would occasionally pause, staring straight at the ground, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. "What's wrong?" I finally asked. "Nothing," he replied quickly, but his eyes weren't looking at me. I wanted to press him, but for some reason that afternoon, I chose not to inquire. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. By the time we emerged from the forest, the sky had turned a deep purple. The wind was getting chilly, carrying the smell of smoke from afar. I frowned. "Do you smell that?" I asked. Bayu turned quickly, his expression changing, but he simply said, "Maybe someone's burning trash." We walked home along the darkening red dirt road. Behind us, the forest that had been so beautiful earlier began to be shrouded in thick shadow. It was our last truly peaceful afternoon. The next night, the smell of smoke would return, along with a fire I would never forget. That night, I awoke to a sound that shattered the silence. It wasn't a dog barking, nor was it the sound of heavy rain. It was explosions. One, followed by another, made the glass of my bedroom window vibrate. I left the house without even having time to put on my sandals. The cold air was piercing, but the smell that wafted in made me choke. The smell of thick smoke, mixed with something even more pungent. Burning wood and straw. "Bayu," I called, and out of the darkness he appeared. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the edge of the village, now glowing red. "Quick, come with me," he said curtly. We ran through the darkness. The wet ground made me slip several times, but Bayu always pulled my hand to keep me steady. In the distance, flames rose, consuming the roofs of houses that hadn't been saved. The fire was alive, breathing, and screaming with the sound of collapsing wood. The heat was palpable, even from dozens of meters away. I covered my face with my arm, but my eyes couldn't tear away from one sight. It was a shadow, tall with swift movements, as if fire posed no threat to him. He lit something on a pile of straw near the rice barn. "Bayu, there's someone there," I cried, and without thinking, I ran toward him. But before I could get far, Bayu's hand gripped my arm tightly. "Don't," he shouted. "There's something burning! We have to—" "Don't!" His voice was sharper this time, almost desperate. I looked at him, and in that moment, I saw something that made me freeze. Fear. Not just fear of fire, but fear of something deeper. Something that somehow felt very personal. Bayu hugged me suddenly, restraining my body from running any further. Behind his embrace, I saw the figure disappear into the smoke, vanishing as if swallowed by the night. I struggled. "You know him, right? You know who it is." Bayu shook his head too quickly to believe. "The important thing now is we have to get out of here." We retreated, away from the increasingly unbearable heat. The night sky turned a fiery red, swallowing the stars. And for the first time in my life, I felt like this village was no longer a safe home, but a trap ready to close around me. Bayu pulled me away from the flames, guiding my steps toward a small forest on the edge of the village. My breathing was heavy, my lungs burning with smoke. Once I was far enough from the fire, I stopped, pushing his hand away. "You know that person, right?" I asked again, my voice colder this time. Bayu shook his head without looking at me. "You're lying." He remained silent, his eyes staring at the ground, his jaw clenched, as if holding back words that wanted to come out but were being held back. I leaned in, trying to catch his gaze. "Bayu, I saw it myself. He deliberately set fire to the rice warehouse, and you held me back." Finally, he looked up. His eyes were dark, not from anger at me, but from fighting something inside him. "Nadia, you don't understand. If you get close to him, you could die. If I don't understand, explain. Who is he? He shook his head again, this time more slowly, and there was bitterness at the edges of his shattered smile. There are things you're better off not knowing. The words cut deep. Better not to know? How could I remain silent while our village burned? We sat on a fallen tree trunk, far from the glow of the fire that was now dying in the distance. The faint sound of crumbling wood could still be heard. In the dim light, I saw his face, sweat mixed with dust, and beneath it all, wounds. Wounds not from tonight's fire, but from the past. Is he someone from your past? I asked cautiously. Bayu stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. If I say yes, you'll be even more reckless. I took a sharp breath. So, yes. He didn't deny it, and precisely because of that, I knew the answer. That night, we returned home in silence, but inside me, the seeds of anxiety began to grow wild. Bayu was hiding something big enough to make him choose to remain silent, even though he knew our village was threatened. And I wouldn't rest until I found out the truth. What I didn't yet realize was that the truth would drag me to a place hotter than any fire. And Bayu might not be able to save me anymore.
That morning, after a long, silent night, I knew what I had to do. If Bayu chose to remain silent, I would find the answer myself. No one could stop me, not even him. The sky was overcast as I tucked the small flashlight and water bottle into my bag. I glanced out the window. Bayu was sitting on his porch, his gaze blankly fixed on the rice fields. I walked quickly, hoping he wouldn't see me, but of course he did. "Nadia, where are you going?" His voice cut through the cold morning air. "To the forest," I replied curtly. He stood up. "Don't be stupid. The forest is wet, slippery, and what? There's someone you're protecting there?" I interrupted. His eyes tightened. For a moment, I almost hoped he would say yes, explain everything. But all that came out was a heavy sigh. "I don't want you to get hurt." "I don't want us all to be burned to death," I replied, then walked away. I walked along the path, still wet from last night's rain. The trees loomed like dark walls, and the slippery ground made me cautious. But I continued to follow the faint trail I'd seen the night of the fire. Footprints in the dirt, mixed with mud. The wind picked up, rustling the branches above my head. Rain began to fall, pouring down, creating a thin mist that enveloped the forest. My flashlight was nearly useless, but I didn't stop. Each step took me deeper, and each second made the sound of my heartbeat grow louder. Suddenly, amidst the pattering of the rain, I heard another sound. Light, quick, like the footsteps of someone trying to escape. I stopped, straining my ears. The sound was ahead, not far away. "Who's there?" I shouted, but only the rain answered. I quickened my pace, but the slippery ground made me slip. My knee hit a rock, and the sting spread quickly. I winced, but got up anyway. The pain was nothing compared to the burning curiosity. But before I could go any further, a hand suddenly grabbed my arm from behind. "Nadia, are you crazy?" "I almost found it!" I exclaimed. "You have no idea what you're chasing." I stared at him, my breath ragged. "If you knew, why didn't you tell me?" He didn't answer, just held my arm tighter, as if afraid I'd disappear into the forest. In his eyes, the rain wasn't the only thing falling. There was something heavier, and I knew I was getting closer to the secret he had been hiding. Bayu didn't let go of my arm until we were out of the forest. His breathing was heavy, as was mine, but he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, as if hoping I would stop asking. I didn't stop. As we reached the village, my eyes immediately caught a thin smoke rising from the distance. "Bayu, that's not from the house that burned down yesterday, is it?" I asked. He turned quickly, his face hard. "Nadia, come inside." "No, we have to go see." We ran toward the smoke, and there, at the edge of the dry field, grass and cornstalks were burning fiercely. It was a small fire, but enough to engulf everything around it if the wind changed direction. Bayu quickly patted the flames with his jacket, while I grabbed an old bucket near the well. The fire was extinguished, but before we could breathe a sigh of relief, faint shouts from the other direction made us turn. There was smoke again, near the rice barn. "We have to go there," I shouted. "No, Nadia." His voice was loud, more like a command. "This isn't our job. You'll only get hurt." "Being hurt is better than staying silent and letting this continue." He stared at me for a long moment, the rain still falling, his hair sticking to his face. There was anger in his eyes, but also an unconcealable worry. "If you keep this up, you'll be the next target." Those words left me frozen. "What do you mean next target?" Bayu gritted his teeth, as if regretting his words. "Forget it. Just stay out of it." I took a deep breath, my left hand starting to throb painfully. The wound there was torn, blood seeping through the torn fabric. Bayu took my hand, quickly ripping off the hem of his shirt and bandaging my wound. His touch was gentle, but his gaze remained firm. "Why don't you trust me?" he asked softly. "Because you didn't trust me before," I replied, my voice trembling. We fell silent. In the distance, the smoke from the small fire was still lingering, as if mocking. The rain wasn't heavy enough to extinguish it all, just as our relationship was slowly burning from within. But it wasn't extinguished yet. I knew one thing: this wouldn't end on its own. And if Bayu continued to withhold the truth, I would find it myself, even if it meant fighting him.
But I didn't have time to think of a plan. That night, the sky changed color. Not the usual dark blue, but a pulsing, fiery orange, like a giant heart in the sky. Bayu entered my house without knocking. "Nadia, come out now!" "What's going on?" "Fire! From the hill! Big!" I stopped in the doorway. From a distance, a fiery red light blazed, and a roar like thousands of twigs snapping came at once. A burning smell filled the air, stinging my nose. A strong wind blew, carrying the flames down toward the houses. We ran to the village's main road. Anyone else might have shouted for neighbors, but our village that night felt like an empty world, as if it were just me, Bayu, and the living fire. The heat was overwhelming. My skin stung even before the flames touched me. The smoke thickened, making breathing a struggle. We tried to find a way out, but all the paths leading out of the village were blocked by flames. "Towards the river!" I shouted, trying to remember the nearest route. "No time!" Bayu shook his head vehemently. "The wind is carrying the fire there, too!" I stared at him, panicked. "So where are we going?" He took a deep breath, then said, quietly but firmly, "If we stay here, we'll die." The fire moved quickly, like a hungry creature. The roof of the house next to ours collapsed, sending embers flying. A small explosion sounded from the burning rice barn at the end of the street. Bayu pulled me into a narrow alley between two houses. Our breaths were ragged, sweat mixed with smoke on our faces. He said, "I have a way, but you won't like it." anything! Hurry!" He stared at me, his eyes ablaze with the reflection of the fire. "We have to burn part of the forest behind our house." I was stunned. "What?" "If we create a clearing, the big fire won't have fuel to move through. It's the only way." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's our land, Bayu, where we grew up. You want to destroy it?" "If it can save us and this village, yes." The sound of fire roared in my ears. I knew our time was running out. Between the torturous heat and crushing fear, I had to decide, defend the land I loved or risk my life along with all who lived here. I stared at Bayu, my breath ragged, my eyes stinging from the mingled smoke and tears. "If we burn that forest, everything will be lost. All our memories." My voice hoarse, almost drowned out by the roar of the flames. Bayu gripped my arm tightly, as if trying to convey his conviction to me. "If we don't do this, Nadia, it won't just be the forest. Us, too. Now choose, memories or lives." The heat grew closer. I could hear the roof of the house collapsing behind us, embers falling to the dry ground, ready to spread toward us at any moment. The wind carried flakes of flame that danced wildly through the air, some landing on my sleeve and scorching the fabric. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my thoughts, but all I saw was Bayu laughing by the edge of the rice paddy, the sound of the river, the scent of the wildflowers he once gave me. All of it was in the forest we were about to burn. "If we fail," I whispered, "we won't just lose the forest. We won't have a place to go." Bayu leaned in, staring deeply at me. "If we die tonight, Nadia, we'll never go home." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. This wasn't the choice I wanted to make. But time was running out. The massive flames were almost reaching the wooden fence of the first house on the edge of the forest. "I won't forgive you if this fails. If we survive, I don't care if you hate me for the rest of your life," he replied quickly. We ran to the small shed behind the house, grabbing a jerry can of spare gasoline and some torches. Every step felt like a betrayal of our past. As we stood at the edge of the forest, I felt the earth tremble subtly beneath my feet, the sound of roots and trunks breaking in the main fire. "Once it's lit, there's no turning back," I said quietly. Bayu nodded, his eyes firm. "That's exactly it. We have to be sure." With trembling hands, I lit the torch. The tiny flame at the tip danced, unaware of the weight of the decision it held. We looked at each other once more. Wordlessly, I threw the torch into the dry brush in front of us. In an instant, the flames erupted, ripping through the branches and leaves like a wild animal set free. The wind lifted the flames upward, creating a wall of fire that licked the sky. We retreated, gasping for breath, watching our past burn, to save a future that might not yet exist. I chose to trust him. Our homemade fire crept swiftly along the path Bayu had set, forming a line of heat separating us from the main fire. The air was thick with the smell of burning gasoline, and thick smoke clouded my vision. It felt like running through a nightmare, drenched in sweat and the stench of death. "Quick! We have to get to the end before the flames from the east connect," Bayu shouted, dragging me through the undergrowth. My breathing was heavy, my lungs squeezed. Every breath of air was a mixture of smoke and dust that burned my throat. Our steps faltered on the sloping ground, slippery from the rain that had fallen earlier that afternoon. but the heat from the fire dried the mud quickly, leaving sharp cracks that stabbed into the soles of my feet. I coughed violently, nearly losing my balance. "I can't take it," I said between coughs. Bayu turned quickly, his eyes sharp despite the smoke-filled tears. "Nadia, it's only a matter of a few more steps. Trust me." His words were like a whip. I forced my legs to move, even though my muscles begged to stop. Ahead, the main fire was already raging, devouring large logs like tiny twigs. The sound roared, rumbling like giant waves crashing against the shore. We reached the end of the path. At the point where our homemade fire would meet the larger one, Bayu dropped down, grabbed a shovel, and began digging a small trench. "If this trench is made, the flames won't be able to cross," he said, his voice hoarse but confident. I joined in the digging, my hands burning from the heat and blistered from the barely holding metal shovel. Every now and then flames shot closer, forcing us to retreat and then advance again, like we were dancing with death. When the two flames finally met, there was a loud pop, followed by a blast of heat that hit my face. Then, strangely, the wall of fire began to shrink. Bayu stared at me, gasping. "We managed to stop it," he said, seemingly in disbelief. I stared at the dying flames, but somehow my chest didn't feel any relief. There was another feeling, fear creeping. Because beneath all this, I knew this fire wasn't just a natural disaster. There's someone out there who started it on purpose.
The raging fire finally stopped. The village was safe. Bayu and I sat on the ground caked with charcoal dust, coughing, our bodies trembling from the lingering heat and cold of the night. We stared at each other, our eyes red, not just from the smoke, but also from a mixture of relief and fear. No words came out, but I knew we had just saved each other. My breath was still ragged as I saw the black line of the fire we had created, now a silent barrier in the middle of the half-dead forest. Bayu looked down, wiping his soot-covered face. "Nadia, this isn't over yet," he said softly, as if talking to himself. I stared at him, trying to read his meaning. "You saw something the first night of the fire, right?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately, his eyes averted, staring into the darkness beyond the trees. "I don't want you to get involved any further, but yes, I saw someone, and I know him." My heart was pounding. "Who?" I asked quickly. Bayu took a deep breath, then exhaled heavily. "Not a stranger. And if I'm right, he'll light another fire, Nadia. Tomorrow or the day after." The night wind blew, carrying a thick, burning scent. I looked at the village in the distance, its lights flickered, as if unaware how close they had come to death. I finally said, "We can't stay still, Bayu," my voice trembling. Bayu looked at me again, this time with a determined gaze. "Then we have to find him before he burns everything down again." In the distance, beyond the half-burned forest, I saw a small light moving, like the remains of a fire that refused to go out, and I knew it wasn't just a lingering flame. The next morning, the village was silent, with only black earth and charred trees. Bayu and I walked through the former forest, hand in hand. The burns on our arms stung, but his grip kept us strong. Each step took us past the remnants of the dreams that once lived here. Tree trunks that were once green were now brittle like charcoal. The ground that was once filled with wet grass was now cracked, and the smell of burning seemed to cling to our skin. I glanced at Bayu. He hadn't said much since earlier, only occasionally staring at the footprints in the ground that hadn't been consumed by the fire. "These footprints are still fresh," he muttered. I frowned. "You mean he passed by here last night?" He replied, his sharp eyes scanning the faint footprints among the ashes. The morning air was cool, but the chill that ran down my spine wasn't due to the weather. "Bayu, if he's still around, that means he didn't stop," he replied, his tone flat but full of threat. "And he's not alone." I swallowed, trying to shake off the dark images in my head. Each step led us deeper into a darker area where a thin layer of smoke still rose from the ground. It was there that I saw something, a gasoline can lying there, half burned, but still smelling pungent. Bayu picked it up, staring at it grimly. He's fast, but we can be faster. I stared at him, realizing that from this moment on, we weren't just saving the village from fire, but also hunting down someone who had deliberately lit an inferno on our land. And beneath that fear, a determination grew stronger in my chest, because this land, this village, was my home, and I wouldn't let anyone burn it down again. But those words only sounded brave in my head. In reality, our village had changed forever. I realized that sometimes we have to be willing to lose some to save the whole. The fire had claimed fertile rice fields, shady forests, and even some houses that couldn't be saved. But amidst all that, the fire also left something priceless: a bond. Bayu and I stood on the edge of the scorched earth, among the extinguished flames and the tears that would never dry. The wind carried a thin layer of ash that clung to our hair, like a bitter memory that refused to fade. Bayu squeezed my hand, his gaze distant. "We're not done yet, Ra." I stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. "You mean hunting him down?" He nodded slowly. "The fire may be out, but that person's evil intentions still burn, and as long as he's free, we'll never be at peace." My heart pounded. I knew the next step wasn't just survival, it was resistance. But amidst my hardening resolve, I also felt something else. Every time Bayu looked at me, there was a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. It had been growing quietly for a long time, but now, after all this, it was becoming clearer. I didn't know how our story would end. All I knew was that this was just the beginning, and for the first time, I was ready to face anything, even if it meant burning again.